Good evening, I'm Peter Karoff, and it's my pleasure to be the moderator of a panel with Peggy Delaney. Peggy, come on here. Peggy Delaney's not here. But we do have Eileen and Mahesh. And the title for this evening's program, The World We Want, is also the name of a book that I'm in the midst of with the same title. And the reason I'm writing a book with the title The World We Want is because of my deep feeling that the assets and liabilities of the world balance sheet is in a very precarious state. And tonight we're going to talk a little bit about what we think can help tip that balance. And later on, at your tables, you're going to have in front of you a draft of a world balance sheet, and you can play with the assets and liabilities. We don't have Peggy, but we do have Peggy's latest poem, and I'm going to read it from Peggy Delaney. It's a conversation with Beaver Unseen. Peggy lives in Montana as much as she can get away from all of her wonderful obligations. A conversation with Beaver Unseen. Thin to almost nothing for thinking too big, what would a world with you as king and queen have been? Beginning with a modest stream, you dreamed a meadow built upon, a world of possibilities emerged, a landscape decorated with your glorious art. You built homes for waterfowl, ponds for frogs and fish to spawn, resulting marshes grew with reeds where blackbirds feasted, herons fished. You never tired, never looked for plans until, that is, first trappers, later ranchers, engineers with different ideas relieved you of your lives and pelts, blew up your brilliant waterworks, stole your ideas without regard for herons, frogs, or other folk. A lesson here says, wounded self, for anyone with big ideas, don't slap your tail too loudly, or the men with guns hidden in bushes at the edge of ponds will shoot you down. It's dangerous to think too big. Let your soul wish passion is larger than yourself. Better to shrink your dreams the size of swimming pools or sinks. Or safer yet, stop dreaming and forget you once imagined painting landscapes so complex and green that no one seeing them would ever want to violate the source that gifted you your palette and your paint. But Beaver says, I am alive. My dreams are large. I may retreat to mountain streams to sculpt imagined landscapes with my teeth and feet. Here for now, just artists, dreamers, wanderers attend my works. I need no witnesses or flatterers to tell me I am right. But listen, I am building, knowing that you're here, and you seeking, wandering the woods to find you, for all of us the rightful path, mourning your losses while you build your dam, the one that holds resources of courage, floods the landscape of your soul with open heart, yet overflows with plenty, water-like compassion. My message to you, beavers of the world, unite. Thank you. 90 years ago, as a little context for our conversation, 90 years ago, at the first meeting of what became the American Association of Colleges and Universities, the then President William McDowell said, your men and women who are teaching are not fundamentally teachers of subjects. They are fundamentally teachers of persons. And the great passion of the teacher should not be the passion of the subject she is teaching, but the passion of the life she is shaping. Sounds like Cambridge College. In some ways, the notion of this kind of conversation is sometimes it's called a theory of change. A theory of change is something that wants to change a circumstance or thinking or attitude or behavior or an existing order of doing things. Most theories of change fail, like the one that tries to get your 16-year-old son to clean up his bedroom. In one sense, though, everything we do or try to do is based on a theory of change. We have a program that's run at TPI, that's a scholarship program that takes a group one very special group of people out of Boston schools with a lot of talent, do not have a dime, are often the first in their college, first in their family to go up to college, and provides them with scholarship funds that enables them to become a full student of that college. So whether it's a scholarship for a student or a new plan for sustainable food production, all of those actions are based on a theory, on a host of assumptions. But every theory needs a bridge or an enabler. There has to be some kind of way to bridge the new idea with the old. So what is Cambridge College? One answer is the college is based on a theory of change that has evolved over a remarkable 35 years. It acts as a bridge, and it enables students, men and women, to move from one kind of life to a better life, a life closer to the one that they want. Social capital, though, is a rather formal term. Eileen Brown, how do you define social capital?
Well, I believe the most precious resource that the world at large has is its individual people. I think the best hope for America is the realization, the self-realization and actualization of each of our citizens. So that social capital to me is harnessing the potential and the possibility of every person and supporting that potential to its fullest realization. That, to me, is social capital.
How about you, Mahesh? How would you define social capital?
Adding to what Eileen said, the social capital is also the intent of people to change. In other words, these people are there, but the intent to change is not there. So that intent and the people and their possibilities together becomes the social capital.
I think those are good, and I would add that social capital is really the sum of all the things in our community, in our neighborhoods, and in our society that add to the quality of our lives. And it's a very, very interesting time in this society when our social capital seems to be very much at risk. In some ways, Eileen, how would you say that Cambridge College has developed what might be called social technology, which is another word, which is a bit of a formal word. What is social technology in your view?
To my way of thinking, what we have done at the college is create a delivery system that supports the learning of all of our students. And I want to go back a minute when Peter and I and Mahesh and Peggy talked about this. Peter asked me to think about what made me want to begin a college, which really I think comes right back to what would make someone think that one could create the social technology for change that has become Cambridge College. And I always like to say that I had the unusual experience of going from practice to theory, that when I went into an inner city Philadelphia public school 45 years ago, I learned everything I know about teaching and learning, and a lot that I know about life from the students whom I taught. And what I realized immediately was that the intelligence, the work ethic, the talent, the motivation of those students would not have an opportunity to be fully realized. That because they were low-income students, primarily Black and Latino and low-income white, they wouldn't have an opportunity to go to college. They wouldn't have an opportunity to realize their own potential, and their talent would not be available for the common good. And as the college progresses, one of the things that delights Mahesh and me and everyone who's involved in the college is the extent to which the lives of our more than 20,000 graduates not only contribute to their own families and communities, but to the larger common good through the school systems and social agencies and businesses where they work and serve. So that, I guess that's a very long-winded way of saying that social technology to me is creating the value system, the vision, the process that allows people to be who they can be. That's the social technology of Cambridge College.
Well, it's interesting because Peggy Delaney tells the story of how when she was 17 years old, she went to Brazil and was working in a very poor village and became aware that the people who lived there, as poor as they were and as uneducated as they were, really knew what they wanted, what they needed to make their own world a better place. And it was out of that, in essence, I think, which was a long time before she met Eileen and became the first chair of Cambridge College, was this sense that in order to affect social change, the only way to realistically do that is to be on the ground and listen to the voices of those with whom you really want to help. And that, of course, is contrary to a great deal of the way both philanthropy and development operates. We're a group of very smart people in a place like the Kennedy Library, come up with ideas for what's needed, and then often there isn't that. We had an instance here just 2 weeks ago, all of us saw that, when there were supposed to be 2,500 people from New Orleans coming to Otis Air Force Base. People down there forgot to ask whether they wanted to come. And I think we keep making that mistake. And I think there is within the whole notion of social theory, there is this gradual realization that you've got to be on the ground. You've got to listen to the voices. And philanthropy, which is the world that I've been operating in for about 17 years now, unfortunately, does not handle that well. There's a tremendous amount of hubris and arrogance, often from donors who are well-meaning, but who are not listening to the voices. Mahesh, what do you think of this?
Well, I'll share a story which is told many, many times in all cultures, and I have heard it in different contexts. When you give a man a fish, you are following the tradition of philanthropy. When you teach that person how to fish, you are doing workforce development. When you give him the instrument by which he can fish, you are giving wisdom and knowledge. But when you provide that person that place where he can fish, so you give him the opportunity of fishing, providing that equal playing field, the place to fish, then you're doing social technology. In other words, you have the intent, you have the person who wants to do that, and you have provided the opportunities and systems by which it can happen.
I think you could make a great case that the highest and best use of philanthropy is when it is acting as a resource to those bridging and enabling efforts exactly along the lines of the metaphor that Mahesh just spoke. I think it's when it really does it well. But one thing that, and I've heard this before from both Eileen and Mahesh, but I still am not clear in my own mind why Cambridge College is able to work with a population and help them get through school and out into a workplace with tremendous numbers, tremendous percentage of success, when really almost every other university, even the very finest, have great difficulty with that. What are the elements here that make this happen?
To that. I mean, one of the hallmarks of Cambridge College is the notion that none of us knows what all of us know, and therefore each of us has things to teach and things to learn. I think that with adult learners, particularly, the realization that being the sage on the stage, as they say in the trade, being the all-knowing person who kind of says, this is what you need to know, write it down and remember it, really, from my students in Philadelphia straight through 45 years later to students at Cambridge College today, I and each of us are constantly learning as much from our students as we're teaching. That notion is so empowering. I find that so many of our students went through school systems where they never learned to trust what they knew already. They were always trying to guess what the teacher wanted as an answer. So that once you begin to trust yourself, your life experience, what you've learned and how you've learned it, you're off on a trajectory that can take you anywhere. So the social technology, if you will, of Cambridge College supports that notion, supports the notion that someone already knows a great deal upon which he can base what he learns. We say the strengths that brought you here are the strengths that will carry you forward. I always say that on opening day to our students. And those notions of the ways in which we're the same are so much more compelling than the ways in which we're different. I think our society still tries to segment people in ways that is disempowering. A third thing that is kind of a hallmark of Cambridge College is that really the only true aristocracy is that of the human spirit. So it really isn't about money or class or race or gender. It's really about character. And all of those notions built into the learning model, into the value system of the college, into the work our students do with our faculty and one another, results in so much more than the sum of its parts. So that it's kind of one of those answers that on one level it could be on a Hallmark card, but it really is true.
It's interesting because, what you describe as the culture, just reminded me of, every parent knows, instinctively knows, that if you can help your child have confidence in themselves, that they feel worthy, they feel successful, that their ability to cope and to deal with the vicissitudes of life will be there. We know this. In some ways, you're almost doing that. There's a very interesting foundation in Ohio called Knowledge Works, which was a conversion of a student loan association. And it's about a $300 million foundation that is the only statewide foundation in Ohio that deals in education. And it's also become a Gates Foundation intermediary. So they're spending about $100 million a year in Ohio. And Chad Wick, who is the president of Knowledge Work, in a piece that he wrote that's going to be part of this book in process, tells the story of how one of their teachers had taken a group of Cincinnati high school students into a science laboratory in a biology company nearby. And this is a group that always acts out. They gave every kid a white coat for the morning that they spent there. And he said you could visually see these kids saying, "Oh, this is something, right?" So it was very interesting sorts of turns. Mahesh?
Well, let me share a story, and that will really tease out some of the principles which are in action at Cambridge College. And it happened in my classroom. I teach a class a mathematics class for paraprofessionals. Paraprofessionals are teachers' aides. These are members of the community. They are working in schools, an average salary of $15,000 or so. They are working there for 10 years, 12 years, 13 years. They know the children. So in my class, I was teaching this lesson on fractions. Most of our students are afraid of mathematics. So she went home. I had given some homework. She was working on the homework on the dining table, and she had a 12, 13-year-old girl, and she was also working on her homework. And she said, "Mom, if you knew some mathematics, you could have helped me." The mother said, "I have the same homework. Why don't we work on our homework together?" So they started working on their homework together. They cried, but they succeeded in completing that homework. She came to the next class and said, "This is the first time I've connected with my daughter. I was able to say, there is something I can do with you, and let's do it together. She helped me do the homework, and I helped her to do the homework. Is it possible that I can bring my daughter next time to the class?" So next class, I see she was sitting there outside the class. She had her homework there and backpack. She was going to be there whole day, so she had her lunch and all of that. I said, "Why is she sitting outside? Why doesn't she come in the class?" So I brought her inside, engaged her in the classroom. She became part of the classroom. Next class I come in, there are 11 13-year-olds sitting in my class. So we created an inner circle where these 11, 12, 13-year-olds were sitting there, and they became my lab. The point here is that our students, when they come to college, they're not just coming for themselves. They are bringing their community, their family, their work needs, and their personal and professional aspirations. And at the same time, they are coming with some hurdles. Cambridge College students have 5 major hurdles. Some of them feel, actually many of them feel, that is higher education for me. This mythology of that higher education is only for a few people, and they have bought this mythology. There's a second hurdle, which is the baggage they bring, having poor academic skills, so they are not able to utilize higher education. So they come, they are there in the first semester, they do poorly in most places, and they are one-semester wonders. The third hurdle they bring is that, how am I going to manage my family life, my work life? Ken is nodding his head because now he has become a student, he knows. So their community life and many other things like that. How am I going to manage all of these demands which the college is also going to add upon them? And the fourth one, how am I going to finance this education? And then the final one, is this education going to help me to achieve my goals? Will I be rewarded for this education? Now, when the colleges know these hurdles and provide for these hurdles, for overcoming these hurdles, there is success. Now, the first hurdle, am I worth higher education? Our admissions counselors, enrollment representatives, they're constantly pointing out, if you have lived a life, successful life for 20 years, successful means you have survived, you have taken care of your family, you are working, there must be something you have. And let's bank on that, let's build on that part. The second hurdle, how am I going to make these skills useful so that I can take advantage of higher education? Academic skills development, whether it's mathematics, writing, reading, critical thinking, providing for that results in success. And then, how am I going to manage all of these things? And now I'm going to share a second story which will illustrate this point. A student recently graduated, but the story of his life begins much earlier than that. She migrated illegally from Cape Verdean Islands to Cuba. And from Cuba, she migrated to Canada. In Canada, she met a man from Massachusetts. She fell in love, married him, and came to Somerville. But the marriage was a very unsuccessful, actually a real problem for her. So to get out of that trouble, she will jog every day from Somerville to Charles River. And on the way, she will see 1000 Massachusetts Avenue, and she will see these fluttering signs and flags of Cambridge College. And she will say, I wonder how does a college looks like from inside. I wonder if I can ever enter a college. So one day she gains the courage, goes to the door, opens the door and closes the door, and walks away. One of our enrollment representatives was walking by. He said, may I help you? He said, no, I was just passing by. He said, well, maybe we can talk. She did not want to stop. But she said, take my card, and maybe sometime you can give me a call. 6 months later, with this crumpled card, she comes to the college, opens the door, comes to the receptionist. It says, is Harold still working here? Harold has moved on. She said, no, there's somebody in his place. I'll introduce you. No, I just wanted to meet Harold. And if Harold is not there, there's no need for me to stay. Well, somehow she was able to persuade the student to stay. Actually, the student, I'm saying student because she has already, in our mind, become the student at Cambridge College. So she joined an info session. And we have a method of introducing our students that rather than you introducing yourself, I will introduce you and you will introduce me. So in that process, you will know a great deal about me and I will know a great deal about you. So she was talking to the neighbor, and she found out the neighbor had a 7-year-old girl, and this woman had a 6-year-old child. So they said, how are you going to manage the babysitting for this child? So the neighbor says, I have a simple answer. You take classes on Tuesday nights, and I'll take class on Wednesday nights. I'll take care of a child on Tuesdays, and you will take care of my child on Wednesdays. The resources they bring for each other's success. We have a cohort model. By that cohort, everybody is worried about everybody's success. As a matter of fact, Eileen used to say that, and now I say that to the students. Look to your left and look to your right. The success for your neighbor is not going to cost you any more. Help that person to succeed when you are also succeeding. So providing the systems which they themselves have created to succeed in this venture is another area which makes Cambridge College successful. So the host of things.
I thought you were going to say you also saved the marriage, but I guess that's But you know that the notion of a cohort that is bound together, it's in the microcredit world, which many of you know a great deal about, where a loan is made, a $7,500 loan to someone who lives in a village. In the original model out of Bangladesh, when the note is then signed, the entire circle of women sign that note. So in essence, it's a community. But I actually have a story which has nothing to do with this. That when my father, many years ago, in the 30s, started a hardware store in Brockton, Mass., he borrowed $500 from the Morris Plan, which was ultimately, I think, bought by Bank of Boston. And I said, well, how did you get the loan? Did you have any credit? He said, no, but the rabbi co-signed. So what flashed to my mind, this rabbi whose balance sheet couldn't be anything, but you could just see what would happen, that if he didn't pay, the rabbi would come to the door and say, hey, George, you got to pay this loan. So it's a similar kind of process. Let's turn a little bit to philanthropy. And Cambridge, to say that Cambridge College would not exist without philanthropy is a absurd understatement. But there were some moments along the way that were very important, and one of the particular moments was when Atlantic Philanthropies came in the door, and Ray Hanlon, who is here with his lovely wife, Catherine, was that person. How many years ago was that?
15.
15 years ago. And Atlantic Philanthropy looked at this uniqueness and said, we're with you. And the interesting thing about Atlantic is that they made grants for how many years?
Well, they made grants for
many years.
Many years.
And we still have one grant.
Yes, we are in, this is a little commercial, we are in the absolute last year of our Atlantic Philanthropy grant.
Well, you know, it's interesting, and I had the same story from City Year, which in essence was really saved at a certain point because Atlantic came in and stayed with them for a long time. And those of you who have any contact with organized philanthropy, either through your own foundations or as a recipient or a seeker, know that very few donors stay with things for the long term. There's a flavor of the month kind of problem in organized philanthropy. Many foundations in Boston say we'll give to you for 3 years and then you have to go away for 3 years. So it's sort of an interesting process.
The college, there's so many things about the college that are really heartwarming and reassuring in a world in which so much isn't particularly heartwarming and reassuring. And one thing is that a group of donors, including Atlantic Philanthropies, including the Rockefeller family, the Larson family, the Rothenberg family, the Hyatt family, the Peretz family, a whole bunch of people who really believed in the work of the college and committed very significant resources and trusted in not just us, but in the importance of our students as part of the future of our country. And that has been one of the great blessings of the college. We could not have done it without people who believed in us and in the students whom we are serving. And of course, in order to continue, need to have people believe in us. But I just think it's a wonderful thing to realize that people who could do literally anything with their resources invested it in our students.
I think one of the a couple of the slides from that beautiful presentation earlier talked about a flat world, and there are some trends in philanthropy that I'm calling open source philanthropy, which is really borrowing from the world of technology, where the open source phenomenon is really quite remarkable. And the open source thinking and technology sort of runs counterintuitive in terms of the way business operates. So, for example, the Linux system is in fact free. The internet was free. And yet on those free platforms have been built this immense industry which is now changing our lives. And there's a kind of cooperation, there's a kind of openness, there's a kind of emphasis on collaboration in a way that is very, very new. Philanthropy, as it's done in most places, is really quite siloed. Collaboration is hard to do. Donors want their name on the building or the equivalent. They want their own program. They have their own basic investment. And one of the things that's missing from that when donors are too focused on what they want out of this is, in fact, the broader need to speak to the public good. And I have been attempting to sell what I call a 360-degree mission statement, where a donor, and this would also be true of a nonprofit, would look beyond their own imperative and think more broadly and ask a set of questions like these. Have we carefully thought through the implications of our actions on others, including possible unintended consequences? Do we avoid simplistic solutions to complex problems, issues, and social systems? Are there people opposed to what we want to do? Is there merit in that resistance? Are we respectful and sensitive to other cultures and beliefs different than our own? Are we on guard against hubris and excessive personal and organizational ambitions? And are we willing to share the work with others? And overall, is our mission the right one? To be open in this sense, it means starting with the need as opposed to starting with a point of view or ideology and using data to support preconceived conclusions. To be open means guarding against being self-referential or motivated by self-improvement and personal salvation, thus really benefiting the giver more than anyone else. To be open means believing in a we that represents a broad public purpose and supports something that really inhabits the commons. And to be open means philanthropy that's dedicated to the promotion of citizenship, civic values, and the education of society. And I think especially to be open, it means a philanthropic sector willing to roll up its sleeves and seriously address the critical issues in America. One of my friends is a fellow named Ralph Smith, who is the senior vice president for the Annie B. Casey Foundation, which is very large, almost $4 billion in assets. And he's the architect of about $160 million a year that Casey spends working on poverty. And he was in Belfast during the G8 meeting in, I guess it was May, and had a kind of epiphany. He went to a rock concert with 60,000 people who were yelling at the top of their lungs, "Make poverty history." And there were 300,000 people demonstrating in the streets of Belfast, trying to get that message through to the G8 ministers, which included, of course, our own president. And he had this sense that in America, and the way Casey operates, they use euphemisms. They use social, maybe some of the jargon we're using, in fact, up here tonight. And that there isn't a seriousness of purpose. We're not saying it the way we need to. And then we look at what we've seen over the last 3 weeks, where poverty in America has been in our living rooms in a way that it hasn't been in a long time. And it really does swing back to what a serious point we are at in this world and in this town and in this nation, and why it is so terrific to be part of Cambridge College.
Well, I believe deeply that our students, the people who are actually making their lives and their communities work every day, provide some of the best hope, not just our students, but the populations that they represent. I mean, I really think that American greed and arrogance and indifference has reached such a terrifically desperate moment that we have to turn to people who are making their lives work and want the country to work. And in some ways, it's a different set of people from the people who are sitting in Washington. I agree with Bill Clinton that what's right about America, what's wrong about America can be fixed by what's right about America, but we really have to go about it in a systematic way. But I refuse to give up on America. I think it's up to each of us to make America the dream it was meant to be.
I came as a visiting faculty and overstayed like many other people. Well, first thing is that we have to look at Cambridge College's mission. The students who come to the United States as students, that is a different group. And there are many universities who are very happy to receive them. As a matter of fact, they will go and recruit them. But Cambridge College's mission is a different one, and that is there is a third world working in this first world. And the conditions of that third world are actually more horrific in this third world than in the real third world. Here, when the inequity is seen in such larger proportions, its impact is a much deeper one. So the ethnic minorities who have immigrated here, but not with higher education, they have come with limited education, or they have a second language as their main language, English is not their main language, or the displaced workers in this country, or poor whites, or African Americans who have not been given the opportunity of exercising their potential or realizing their potential. That is a large population enough for us to meet the needs for. So our mission is to really provide for these categories. Now, if you were to design a program for somewhere else outside the United States, we'll still look for the same kind of population. In other words, those who did not get the admissions into IITs of India or the major elite institutions of other countries. So our goal is that how do we provide higher education so that there is a level playing field for that person in that society so that they can take advantage of that opportunity to better their lives and their communities' lives. So that is the mission of the institution. That's why Cambridge College is not in just Cambridge. It is in all those places where the populations mirror the demographics of Cambridge College here. There are these four categories of students, minorities who did not get the higher education. See, community colleges have provided a great access mechanism for students, but it is still not realizing that dream of their achievement.
One problem we have with this panel is that there were going to be four of us. So we're fortunate. But I think it's probably time to end. Eileen, do you have a benediction before I give mine?
Well, first of all, I want to say again how wonderful it is that people care enough about our students and about our college to come out on this rainy, windy evening. And Peter asked me how had I hung in for all of these years. He said it in a way that my gray hairs multiplied as I heard him on the phone. And I have hung in all these years. But I'd like to say that the reality of the college and its achievement has so far outdistanced any dream I might have had that it totally galvanizes me and all of us engaged in it to go forward, and how glad we are that you're going to go forward with us.
Some of us wish we had hair. Well, thank you all, and I'm going to just end with some words that really are about legacy, but I think they really are about Cambridge College. They come from a Senegalese writer, Baba Dijon, and they go like this. In the end, we will conserve only what we love. We will love only what we understand. We will understand only what we are taught. And thank you, Cambridge College.
Thank you, Peter.